Hello everyone. Today is Thursday, January 14th, 2016. My name is Brian McInerney. I'm the hydrologist here with the National Weather Service. This is a water supply forecast looking at the January 1st forecast made by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. When we look at November, what we saw was a couple of thoughts. This feature right here is the high pressure that typically exists in some form out of the Pacific. Last year, it blocked all of the weather and really started back in the fall of 2011. And as you can see now, it's a much smaller feature, and the door is open for more weather to come in. These are the rendition of the winds at about 11,500. And for most of the storms during November, it was very active, but it missed Utah. And because what would happen is typically it would come across here, drop into Utah. With the warmer waters off of the coast, the low pressure systems would dig a little bit farther south and then come up into this area here and then swoop out over. But as far as Utah goes, we were missed. We had 4 consecutive events that came through and missed us. When we move into December, we see a different story. The high is still here, but we had this zonal flow that came right across and deposited a great deal of snow throughout Utah, especially northern Utah, and improved our water supply conditions drastically due to this event right here. The high is still out here. It's still quite small, and it's not building, and that's a good thing for Utah's water supply as of today. When we look at the precip anomalies with this system, we'll start in July, as the last 3 years have had precipitation events during July and August that augmented our water supply really quite well for those last 3 years. So I thought we'd look at precip during that time. Cooler colors indicate above normal precipitation. Warmer colors indicate below normal precip. We'll start in July. And what we see are just kind of a couple of areas, southeast Utah and parts of northern Utah, that did quite well through thunderstorms. But for the remainder of the state, it's been a little wetter for the most part, but near normal. When we look at August, what we see is northern Utah did a little bit better, right around this time, 170 to 200% of normal. And understand this is thunderstorm activity for the most part. When we look at September, things kind of dried out a little bit for most of the state. Areas of the northwestern Utah probably had a few storm systems move through there, but it was when you need it. Now is in September and October, a lot of rain, big scale storms coming across, putting down a lot of rain just to dampen the soils and get as much moisture as you can into those soil layers and lower elevations. We didn't really see it during September, and we saw a little bit of it in southeastern Utah, but really for the most part the northern mountains were dried out, 50 to 70% of normal precip in October. So we go into this water supply with dry soils, and this is on the heels of 4 years of below average runoff. Now we're in November when we hope to start generating storms. We had storms, but unfortunately they didn't really hit us. But what we did see was record flooding down in Missouri, down in Texas, Oklahoma, in these areas. But for the most part, Utah was missed. And then we go into December, and we did have some pretty good precip during this time. There was areas that 300 to 400% of normal precipitation, and across the board, we did quite well during December. Now when you move into January, as far as precip goes, the great majority of the mountain areas were somewhat dry, but still some areas of southeastern Utah did better. And this is a kind of a really drastic look at things, because we could start using consistent storm activity over time. We'll see how this shakes out for the rest of January. When we look at temperatures, though, we start in July, and what we see is July was cooler than normal in Utah. August, cooler than normal in Utah, right around normal for the most part. Now when you need to get cooler, we can have storms come through. It started to heat up. We're somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 degrees above normal, and then when you look at October, it was warmer again, even on the range of about 7 to 10 degrees above normal. And then November cooled off. We still didn't see as much precip as we would have liked, but still temperatures were a little cooler. December, things were a little cooler, right around normal, whereas the eastern part of the U.S. was very, very warm. And this is basically a flip-flop of what we saw last winter. The west was very warm last year. The east and the central part of the U.S. was very cold. When we look at January up to the 13th, it's cooled off across a great deal, and there's been some very cold temperatures, which is nice to see. It's more like winter. It'll keep the snow where we need it. Last year we had runoff in January on the north aspect of the Una Mountains, something unheard of. So when we look at current snowpack as of today, and these are the NRCS SnowTel stations, and it's basin average snowpack. Y-axis is snow water equivalent, x-axis is time. The blue line is the average for each drainage, and the red is last year. You can see how anemic our snowpack really was. And then the green. And as far as the Bear goes, we're at 82% of median. When we look at the Weber, 91% of median. When we look at Six Creeks, 93% of median. Going farther south down into the Provo drainage, 98%. Sliding eastward to the Duchesne, 92%. Upper Green at 83%. Lake Powell at 90%. Quite good. That includes Colorado also. Sevier at 133. A big difference from last year. And the Virgin at 149%. Virgin Basin right now has the biggest snowpack percentage-wise than the rest of the state, which is very nice to see. They had near record low snowpacks last year. So let's put all this together and we'll come up with a forecast for points throughout the state. And we'll start with the Bear in this area here. We'll look at 2 points. The first one is the Bear at Woodruff Narrows Reservoir, and we're expecting 71% of average. And this is the volume of water going past this point from April 1st through the end of July. And hopefully this number will get bigger, but the loss between the snowpack that we have on the ground and the amount forecasted, we're going to see this really throughout the Great Basin, is the deficit in soils where you got dry soils. We've got groundwater that's very low. So we're going to lose meltwater into the ground as we melt. When we look at Stewart Dam, 46% of average, a little bit less. When you look at the Weber, and that's where we're going to go right now, one drainage farther south, we'll start with the headwater area of Oakley at 82% of average. Then we'll move over to East Canyon Creek at 61% of average. And then we'll see Pineview at 68% of average. Six Creeks, a little bit farther south. We'll look at Little Cottonwood at 79% of average. And then at City Creek at 58% of average. Moving down farther south again to Utah Lake Drainage, we'll look at a couple of points. The headwater, Woodland. On the Provo, it's 71%. This is upstream from Deer Creek. And then Spanish Fork near Castilla at 59% of average. Over to the Duchesne. And we'll look at 3 points here. We'll start with Strawberry Reservoir. Their inflow into there at 62% of average. Duchesne near Tabiona at 77% of average. And Knight's Diversion at 80% of average. I'd like to see those numbers a little higher. We could use a little bit bigger snowpack, but we'll see how it shakes out. The pattern is active, and I think that's a plus right now. We don't have the big blocking high. The Upper Green River flowing into Flaming Gorge at 71% of average. Down at Green River near in the state of Utah at 80% of average. Then we'll go to Lake Powell. And this is a very large drainage, including the Green and the Colorado. So we'll look at the Colorado contingent. It's as the Colorado comes into Utah near the town of Cisco. And we're looking at 96% of average. And then the actual inflow into Lake Powell at 89% of average. The Sevier River drainage flowing south to north. And we'll look at the headwater area of Hatch. And that's 108% of average. And then we're going to go downstream to Marysvale. We're going to see 100% of average. Bang on normal for this area, which is nice to see. Virgin River drainage, as far as percent of average, they're doing so much better than they were last year. Near record flows last year. The headwater areas of Virgin anticipated to be at 103% of average. And then the outflow at Littlefield at 106% of average. So when you look all told, we're doing much better. Southern Utah, as we speak, is greatly improved. Northern Utah doing much better. We could use about 130 to 140% and above snowpack to get a normal runoff in northern Utah. We'll wait and see if we get there. But until that time, here's my contact info. If I can do anything for you, give me a call, drop me an email, and we'll chat. Until then, we'll talk again. Thank you.